Today I want to show you this piece of personal history. It's a Nederlandse meubelfabriek NEMEF lock. It's old, I think it's at least 40 years old, but it can be much older as well. I will pick it, I will show you what's inside. But first I want to show you the key and tell you where this is from. So you can see it's a real nice key, like you don't get anymore. Number 4, which suggests there aren't many keys and it's not a good thing for security. You can see it's a lever lock, obviously, with a stump, and quite a narrow stump. It's actually difficult to get a pick wire thin enough to go in there. I'll show you that later. And this piece is basically from my parents' old kitchen door. They have a house that's around 100 years old, and this thing really stopped functioning, but I'm glad to get this back to working order. They replaced it a long time ago for a much better lock, but this piece of history they preserved, and by now, because I'm into lock picking and everything, it found its way to me. So I repaired it, cleaned it up a bit. Rust is still falling out, but that's part of it. I'm gonna keep it like it is. I'll show you what I did to pick it, and I will also show you how I got it in working order and how this thing is involved over here. Alright, let's see if we can pick it. So key works fine. I'll put in the tensioner that I made, and I really had to thin down. You can see that there is almost nothing left because of the stump blocking all the axis. But I can just squeeze it in enough, and you can see the bolt retracts. So that's just good enough. I'll squeeze it in as much as I can. Then I'll take my picking wire from a barbecue skewer, as suggested by Andy Mack in one of his many videos. I also had to grind that down, but that should now work. If you look at the length, then it just fits there, which is typically an indication that the length is good. So now I'll try to tension it and see if we can get it picked. Okay, now I feel the levers move. And we're open. Let's get this wire out. You can see I have control of the bolt now, and if I turn it around, you can see on this side that it's actually picked. So let's open it up and see what is inside and what I had to do to get this back to working order. Plenty of rust is still falling out. So the original handle is still on. It's a bit clumsy to open, but I'll see what I can do. That's one screw. That's number 2. Now this should come apart. Now it moves, but this part is still clamped up under a heavy spring, so I have to wiggle it to get that loose. More rust falls out and it's open. So here you see the awesome mechanism inside, and it's very rusted. There's a very heavy spring here, old school. There's an even heavier spring over here to push the mechanism back. And here you see the levers with the springs and the bolt. So let's take those apart and I will show you what I had to do there. By the way, the other side contains nothing too spectacular except this part, and this part I'll talk about it later. So the first thing is the stump. It was painted too much, so basically it really wouldn't budge. It's a really tight fit here, and with the paint on it, it just got completely jammed up here on the sides. So what I did is I took a piece of wood, placed it here, hammered it loose, then I wouldn't damage the metal, and then I just ground off some of the paint there, as you can see, and that allowed it to move. You can't really take it out like this, and you also can't take it out from the other side because it's so tight in here. But then I got it moving again. Then I took a toothbrush, I cleaned up the rust that was sticking out. I just pressed this down, moved it back and forth like this to grind it down further. Well, you still see the rust come off, but it works again. It works smooth now. Then the other problem that I had was with the levers. As you can see, the springs are different. The problem was that this spring here, this is the original, you can see it's very corroded, and actually the other two were so corroded that when I took it out and placed it back in, just this amount of tension was enough to break it. Then I actually used a very thin piece of metal. I placed the lever on a vise like so, could hammer that out, place it back in, but it was still so brittle that the rest of it broke again and again. So in the end, that's not really a solution. Then I found out another solution, because there are springs. I'll show you a picture, and the original part right there. I took the springs from one of those child safety electrical socket add-on things that we have here in Europe. I had a few. They broke when I removed them from the sockets here in the house because they were all bad, damaged, and so on. But I kept the springs, and when I was browsing around for a replacement spring, these were actually perfect. There's plenty of spring tension for the levers to go back, as you can see. They fit perfectly. I didn't have to do any modifications except just bend them a bit straight, and a bit straight is good enough for a lever lock like this anyway. It will function just fine, and this really works perfectly fine now. So if I put the spring here on the stump, you can see it has a nice snap to it. It's nothing too much. Key functions perfectly fine. So like this, very easily I could actually get this lock back in working order, because one of the springs was already broken inside. This was painted, so now this moved again, and that was basically the repairs that I had to do. The other interesting thing about this lock is that there are basically two keyways. There is one obvious keyway over here, but there is also a stump over there, and you see two arcs in the levers. And if you look at the other side, there's also a stump and a keyway, and if you turn this around, you can see there are basically two keyways to the same lock. Now how this works is that you enter the key from this way, so it goes around the stump, and you can use it to open and close the lock, which doesn't work perfectly without the stump. But also from the other side of the door, you can use the same key and operate the lock. So that's something interesting. I didn't see that much everywhere, but I'm no lever lock expert at all. And interestingly, the wood that this came from in the door basically was completely blocked on one side, so the door could not be closed, I guess, from the outside, because this was used for a back door to the kitchen from the garden area. The other thing is to put this back together. Because of this thing over here, it has to basically sit on this side of the spring, and between this stump and this folded piece of the bolt over here. And it's a bit of a pain to get it back in, but I found out how to do it by now. So basically what I do, I first put this round part within the spring. Then with that I can just push the end over the stump. I can go behind this stump over there, and then with using my thumb to press this out of the way, I can place it inside. But it took me a while before I found out. Let's see if I can do that on camera. So it's inside the spring. Now I go over the stump, press the spring out of the way, use my thumb, and now it's inside. But it's not in the right place yet, because if I turn it around, and I don't want to lose the position of the levers in the meantime, you can see this is in the wrong place, but with some wiggling that also is able to get in place now. And now everything lines up. I can put the screws back in place, and we have a working lock again. And from the other side it works. So this is a nice piece of my personal history that is back to functioning order. Picked. I hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching. Take care.